So just to wrap up, we've talked about, finding your value, protecting it on a personal level and what individuals can do. And each individual is a product of society. What are the biggest challenges that we face as a society, or misconceptions we have about what is truly valuable and what is truly worthy and where we should get our confidence from? What challenges are we facing and how can we overcome that?
So I think for myself, I know I mentioned it earlier, but it is something that I'm very passionate about. I think comparison is definitely a very real one, and I think more so in this digital age, in the social media age. And I think oftentimes about like the younger generation, so maybe kids that are in school right now, secondary school, college, and I imagine them having to navigate school with Instagram, with the filters, with like all these different kind of ideas of beauty and all these kind of different
ideas.
There's
a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you're told you can't even really figure it out for yourself.
Exactly. And it was hard enough when I was growing up. I sound like I'm really old, I'm not. But it was hard enough when I was growing up, talk less of it in this age. So I think comparison is a very real one, because I think that is damaging. A lot of young people, not just women, because I think sometimes the focus can be on women, but I think
it's across the board.
Across the board, by and large. But then I think another thing, probably like a more general thing that affects us, would be identity. So, and failure to understand our identity. And I think one of the things that's really key about this generation as well, and just I guess humanity really, is that we often place our identity in the wrong thing. So I'd say, for example, at this age I'm at, I think that a lot of us place our identity in our career, which it makes sense. Like, I get it, do you know what I mean? It completely makes sense. I understand why that pressure is there. But for example, during that time when I didn't have a job, and I wasn't working, I began to make that about who I am as a person. So that began to equal, oh, I'm not worthy, I have nothing to add, I'm not valuable, just because I wasn't working. And I think oftentimes, when we get that job, we tell ourselves it's because it's something we're passionate about, but I think sometimes it's actually just for the title, is to be able to say, to be able to introduce ourselves and say, hi, I'm a executive, and it feels good and everything, but that's not where your identity lies. And I think it's something I've had to even learn, even with ministry and even with things like Trust in the Process, the podcast, things that I consider to be God-given, even those are not who I am, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not tied, like, it's obviously elements of who I am, and my nature and like my passions come out through that, but you are not what you do.
Honestly, and I think that the best way to describe it is that it's not who you are. It's a manifestation of who you are. So you can't, and I think this is the issue with when people pour themselves into whatever it is, whether it's just looks or career, is that stuff can change. So it's a manifestation, because manifestations can evolve and find themselves in different places, and that's great. But when it becomes the core and it changes, then your whole life is thrown into disarray. And I'm sure that happens to all of us at some point.
Definitely. And it tends to happen, like, it'll be subconscious that you were placing your worth or your value in these things, and it's not until, like you said, like something falls apart, you're the carpet's been taken from underneath your feet, suddenly you're like, actually, who am I, without this job or without this person, without this relationship, whatever the case may be. So I think understanding our identity is definitely a major one.
And I think that what you've just said about consciousness, and while we're wrapping up on this, but we're obviously going to have to keep talking about identity, and what we're aware of is, like, we think that because we don't wake up in the mirror and say, oh, I have a problem with my self-worth, or I have a problem with my self-confidence, or I have a problem with my identity, or I have a problem with comparison, we think that we don't we don't need to hear all this stuff. But the truth is, it's all subconscious, and it actually plays out in the actions, in the insecurities, in the overcommitments, the inability to say no. That's where that stuff comes out. Definitely. So it's so important to have these conversations and be open about it, because even as we've been speaking, so many triggers have gone off in my mind, and I'm sure it's the same for everyone who would be watching. So that's been brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been really good to have you.
It's amazing. Thank you.
Just before we end, one question I ask everybody is, if you could give yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, one piece of advice, and that could be about anything, what would it be?
Okay, so I'd give myself several words, I'm not gonna lie. I would sit myself down and
here's a list.
We'd have a good okay, so on July the 6th, this is what I would have said to you, and on the I could say plenty of things, but I think probably the biggest thing on my heart right now would be that you are enough. definitely to 16-year-old Deborah, who was, like I said, trying to find her worth and like her value in relationships, and in attention and in compliments, and you know, all of those different things. I think I was always just trying to prove to myself that I'm enough ultimately, and that I am of value. And I guess that, yeah, I wish that she had known that earlier, that she is enough, and why she is enough, that she's enough because God says she's enough, that she's complete because God says she's complete, and that has nothing to do with what other people might say, what other people might not say. Yeah, so that's probably definitely what I would say to her right now, but there'd be a few other things, so yeah. Later, yeah.